All right, we're live on LinkedIn. We're back after a couple weeks of being gone. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. I want to welcome Keith Weightman to the show. Keith, how you doing?
Matt, I'm so good, and I'm glad to be here. I know we've been talking about this for a while, and glad we could finally catch up.
Yeah, and when we did this yesterday, just to test it a little bit, the dark background threw me off. No matter how many times I've seen you do this on the LinkedIn, and then today you even wore a dark shirt, so you really only see your head, which I like.
Well, I normally wear like a black T-shirt,
Right.
and you can't see anything but my head. People are like, "Dude, it looks like your head's floating." the floating head that draws.
Right, the floating head that draws with his wrong hand and backwards.
Exactly. There I am.
Hey, before we get started, obviously you're the RVP at Bullhorn, and one of the things that impressed me when I first heard you on actually Rob Jepson's podcast about a year ago now is how long have you been there?
January will be 12 years. Wild.
That's got to be a record from any sales leader I know right now.
Well, you would think so. My VP, 12 years. We actually started on the same day. My CRO started as a BDR. He's been there for like 18 years. President's been there for 20. The CEO, founder, still founder led, 25 years. It's like they've built such a great culture. It's a hard place to leave.
Right. You know what? Have you heard that? The Boston Celtics won the title last year, and what you just told me reminded me of what I've heard about like their front office a little bit, like owner, marketing person, head of sales. Like everybody's been there for like 20 years through the ups and downs, which it just isn't really normal like these days.
No, not at all. I've been super blessed to land here, and I'll continue to stay around for as long as they'll keep me.
Well, hey, 12 years is a great run no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And then for everybody watching live on LinkedIn right now, go ahead and drop us a chat. Feel free during the entire conversation. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to put it in. We might even try something new today. If somebody wants to, hop in with us, I can send a link and I can get you live on with Keith and I as well. But I've never done that before, so we'll see how that would work. But I want to start where, the other thing I want to say is if you're listening to the recording on the podcast, I would, if it's on Apple or Spotify, I would go to Spotify and watch the recording because Keith is going to do some cool stuff with his light board. Or you could watch the recording on the LinkedIn Live. So I just wanted to throw that in as well if you're watching this on the recording. But I wanted to start where you first initially caught my attention. And I actually went back and listened to the podcast this morning, and I would recommend anybody to listen to Rob Jepson's podcast on sales leadership anyway. But Keith's episode, I actually sent it to a couple people today because I was talking urgency with a couple sales leaders yesterday. But where you caught my attention, and it was around fake urgency. And fake urgency has always drove me crazy. But I've heard sales leaders talk about it all the time, especially at the end of the month. But it just cracked me up. So what I want to talk about today is like fake urgency versus real urgency. And you told me a story yesterday, just during our pre-call, about, I think somebody asked you, how are you catching people's attention, executives' attention right now at the end of the year? And what was your answer?
It was a trifecta. It's bribes. It's, the occasional threat, groveling. Do a couple of those and you sometimes get their attention. Not always the best way to get their attention, but obviously I said that in jest and jokingly, but it's definitely the environment, selling environment now is much harder than it's been in the last, really like 10 years. So I'm a big believer in controlling the controllables and focus on the things that you can control. We can't control the macroeconomic environment. We can control our own skill set and how we treat customers and prospects, and our, building that skill set over time. That's what we can focus on. So that's what I try to do myself as well as to instill in my team.
Yeah, I like the win and winnable. And what you talk about a lot is what I talk about a lot is your ICP. And like you sell, Bullhorn sells CRM, correct?
Yes, specifically to staffing and recruiting firms.
I like how there's two things I've almost never wanted to sell. One would be CRMs, just because there's so many of them. And the other one, I have a couple clients like in medical. I just never wanted to sell into doctors either.
Yeah.
But the CRM I always thought would be tough. One, because, Salesforce. Two, HubSpot, which I like, which is so easy to use. And heck, you can use the free model for so much of it.
Yeah.
But talk about how you look at your ICP a little bit, if you're open to that, and how you narrow it down.
Yeah, I mean, so when I started, Bullhorn was very focused on the professional staffing segment. So think like IT staffing, finance and accounting. That was like the sweet spot for the longest time. So when we would get leads from light industrial companies or places that we are high volume VMS shops, like some reps would work them, but the smart reps would be like, I know I'm wasting my time. I probably have a 10 to 20% chance that maybe they pick us, but I've got this segment over here that I know I've got like an 80% chance. And if it's a qualified deal, I'm going to win that. Right. And over time, as we've grown and evolved as a company, now we service all the different, healthcare verticals, light industrial. We've got whole teams built around it. So, we've also grown through acquisition. So as we've gotten bigger, it's gotten more complex for the reps because they have multiple different products now coming in. So what we've had to do is we're not going to necessarily shrink the product set. So we shrink the focus by creating specialized teams. Now we have a healthcare only team. We have a professional team. We have a light industrial. So going back to, I think you may have said it, going narrow to go wide. And simplifying the process for the reps, because now they're talking to customers that have the same problems, the same challenges. We solve the same thing, and they don't have to context switch if they're talking to professional healthcare, so on and so forth.
You said something that it's so hard for reps to understand. When you said you have a 10 to 20% chance to win these, or a 70 to 80 chance to win these, and over time, 70 to 80% just win out so much. But here's the problem that I see is that when people go outside of the ICP, and I do everything like a green, yellow, red account, right? Green is like go, yellow, okay, but you're probably not going to make as much, or the percentage is down, and red is like a no-go. The reps that go after the green accounts 90 to 100% of the time, guess what they get? They get green accounts.
Yeah.
But when they spend their time in the yellow and red accounts, it takes away from the green accounts they're going to get, and they waste their time down there. But it's hard for people to understand because somebody closed a deal, in this vertical, and they think that that's better because somebody wants to talk to them there. But to your point, the best reps spend all their time with the better accounts.
Yeah. I mean, look, so the average rep, this is where they start. They're like, hey, I don't have enough accounts. I need more accounts. So they start here at the top at the wide because they think they're going to go, okay, we got this account, we got this account. If I can just get someone, I'm going to fall and get a prospect, that fits. But that's at 20%, where you really have to reverse that. And you start here at the lower number of accounts, go narrow to go wide, because you then start to focus on, we call them ABCs, you call them green, yellow, red.
Yep.
Focus on your A's.
Yep.
That's where you're going to spend 80% of your time. And that's where you should really focus. So it's a big a myth that you need more. What I found as we've grown, our territories have gotten shorter.
Yep.
Reps do better because you have to focus. You can't be, you don't have anything else to go after. So you got to focus on the ones you have, and it's provided better results too.
Yeah. First startup I was with, we started with 300 just because we were just trying to find anything.
Yeah.
Went down to 125, went down to 75, went down to 50, and then ultimately decided 75 was probably the right number for that particular place. But, everybody thinks more is better, but I love that's our first use of the light board there.
There you go.
But that's a good, that's good. So I want to segue back into urgency, which is one of the titles and one of the things that we want to talk about. How do you think about urgency?
So I'm a big believer that you can't necessarily create urgency if a customer doesn't have a compelling event, right? If there's not some type of factor that's driving them towards a certain decision, trying to come in with a last minute discount, or we're going to do this for, 75% off if you can do it by the end of the month, that just feels like a sleazy sales tactic, and it actually turns buyers off. Versus, the way you create urgency is tying your solution to what the customer is trying to achieve on the timeline that they've set forth throughout your entire sales cycle, evaluation, discovery process. So that's how I would say is the biggest difference between a fake urgency and real. The real is tied to a compelling event that the customer cares about.
And I would say, which is what you're saying, you just didn't say the word. It's like, I always want to know where something is on their priority list. Because,
yeah. Is it a problem, or is it a problem that's blocking a priority, right? Because every business has problems. Yeah. Sometimes they just got to let it burn, right? If it's not blocking a priority, like, you can only take on so much.
Yeah, because to your point, I think, and here's what I want to talk about, because I know we're going to get into discovery and we're going to use the light board in that. But obviously, you can only find problems if you're asking questions.
Yeah.
Correct. This is going to be a two-part problem, a two-part question. Okay.
I'll do my best.
What do you think the difference is between an average discovery call and a good discovery call?
An average discovery call asks first level questions that they learned in sales boot camp, that they see on a sheet that they know that they need to ask.
Give me a couple.
What are your goals for the year? What keeps you up at night? Walk me through your challenges.
Yeah.
And typically in an average discovery, they'll ask a question. The customer will say something like, we've got all these systems that we need to consolidate, and we're really trying to get down to one because we've got all these manual processes that we're trying to get rid of, and so on and so forth. And the rep gets happy ears and like, oh, I can automate that. I can figure that out. But they never go deeper to understand what are the actual implications of that. Why is that a problem? How have they tried to solve it before? Why or why not didn't it work? Who else does it impact? Do they care about it? So average is you ask just that first level question. A great discovery, they are just digging and mining for pain through a layered process of questioning.
I agree. And here's what I say. I know you love to listen to calls.
Yes, I do.
I do too. Right. And I still, right, for my clients, they think I'm crazy sometimes. I'd be like, hey, send me some of your reps' calls. I'll listen to them, or send me this. Right. And here's actually what I've seen over time. To your point, somebody actually may ask that average question you were saying, but like, hey, what challenge do you have? They actually get a great answer. Right? You might be talking to somebody like, I love the people. And here's what I've seen like today. People have been hit with so many sales calls over the years, and every rep sounds the same, that a lot of clients will start the call and be like, hey, Keith, I know you're going to want to know about my business. And they'll actually tell them a bunch of stuff before you even have to ask. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've heard a lot of calls like that lately. Yeah. But a lot of times, and I'm sure you sit there, probably listen to these calls, and you hear the person say everything that you'd want to hear. And then they don't ask another question and get right into the product.
Yeah. That is like for me, that's the biggest difference between someone who I would consider an elite seller they ask way more questions than the average rep, almost to the point of like, wow, you're asking a ton of questions. But it's because they're naturally curious to understand the why,
Yeah.
right? The thing behind the thing, right? They may understand what the problem is, but do they understand the other downstream impacts of that problem? And you can only do that by asking questions. But I think you will agree, it's a skill that you develop over time. I know when I first started, like I was terrible, but I had a drive to want to get better. I was naturally curious. I was always seeking out information to learn more and get better. And I got better over time. I'm still not great, but I've gotten better than when I was. It's definitely a skill that, takes practice.
Well, I want to bring that up because I think the two hardest parts of the sales process, I'll see if you agree with me, are, especially if you're an outbound organization, like you're actually trying to generate meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the hardest part is actually getting the meeting, right? And then I think the second hardest part is discovery.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer that deals are won or lost in discovery. Once you get the past of like, okay, I've got interest. And so, depending on what you sell. So our implementations are fairly lengthy because they're bigger projects in my space, at least. We have smaller accounts too, but you're talking multiple six figures and then, anywhere between 9 to 12 months to implement. So my belief was if a customer wasn't going to spend 3 hours with me in a discovery, prior to COVID, we did a lot of on-site discoveries, which is why you see now that COVID happened and I was trying to figure out how I'm going to get my light board fixed or my whiteboarding fixed. If they're not going to spend multiple hours with me to understand the problem, is it really a priority? Right, something that they're going to be willing to spend time on? Whereas, right? Oh, well, they just said if they could just see the demo, we got to do that first. And if we do that, then we can do this. Like sometimes there's a case for that, but it's far and few between based on at least what we sell.
Yeah, no, for sure. Hold on. I got a good question here. All right.
Okay.
It's like Haran. And I hope I said that right. Because I actually thought about this when you said like the good curious reps want to ask like the question, over ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Ron asked, how do you balance asking a lot of great questions and not sounding like it's an interview? What are your keys for framing questions? I think that's a valid question.
You know how I can tell when we go back to listening calls?
Yeah.
Now the call recordings are so sophisticated. You can see talk time. Like when I see the rep talking 40 to 50% of the time, they're talking at the prospect. They're not asking questions. Because what a rep will do that's not on the elite side, they'll ask a question and they'll go, yeah, we've heard that before. This is how we would solve it with us. And, we've worked with this company to do the same. So they get this long monologue of they hear a problem, they try to solve it right away. Yep. The best reps will ask a question and they'll say, get an answer and be like, oh, so how long has that been going on? And then they ask that and be like, have you guys tried to solve that before? And then you get the long monologues for the customers.
Yeah.
So to that question, if the customer is answering and providing a lot of information, keep asking questions. And sometimes if you're just silent, you ask that question of, oh, how long have you been doing? Oh, about 9 months. And you just sit there. Well, we started this, blah, 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 right? They'll keep talking because people are afraid of the silence.
Hold on, stop, because the silence, everybody's scared of the silence. And yes. I had a rep. Okay. I should actually say his name because I don't think he would care. But I want to start because Haran, this goes back to actually what you asked. He used to have a list of 10 questions on his notebook. Okay. And he would ask the question, and no matter what the person said, he would go to the next question. No matter what the person said, he would go to the next question and the next question. And he had 10 of them. So kind of fix that problem of, hey, at least go off of what the person's saying. But what he was notoriously bad at was the silence part. So a good exercise I did with him was I was like, do me a favor. After everything that you say, please just pause a couple seconds and see what happens, because people aren't expecting the question, or they don't even know what you're going to say, or maybe they're not done. Let them think, because I think that silence is the key to a lot of things, because I think that's when it comes back to asking an interviewer. You're afraid of the silence, so then you got to ask another question. You didn't ask it off of what they said. And I just think that silence is probably one of the keys to discover.
You just nailed this question around how that's why it feels like an interrogation, because they're not really listening to understand. They're listening to respond, and their response is the next question on their sheet.
Correct. And then as the person, and I'm sure, you buy things, I'm sure, for your company, like, and you talk to, that's one of my favorite things to do is buy stuff. Although I hated making decisions, because that's another thing reps don't realize is how hard the decision is to buy something for your company. But it was always fun to, be the buyer, because you knew right away, like, who was the good rep and who was the bad rep. And, I'd love to know when your team's selling, how many companies are you usually up against? I mean, all the CRMs, but are you usually up against a certain few?
Yeah, there's probably a good handful. There's probably 3 or 4 that we see almost in every deal. And as you go up market, that even drops down. There's probably like 3 that you'll see. But once you go down low, there's a bunch of competition there. I mean, now HubSpot doesn't really play in our space, because there are enough niche specific staffing recruiting platforms that are CRM and applicant tracking all in one, that, HubSpot doesn't have applicant tracking. So they have to find something else, where there are enough little ankle biters in this space that do really good things, but they're smaller companies. And we have a lot of competition in, across the board, but definitely down market.
I'm asking you the question because I want to ask you this.
Okay.
Do you believe that the best rep almost always wins?
No.
Okay.
Sometimes the answer is yes, but I mean, the higher you go up in market, what they care about more is risk. And you mentioned it, the fear of making the wrong decision, I think is more powerful than a rep that's really good, right? It's like the whole IBM, like, no one got fired for IBM, or no one gets fired for going to ADP, because they are the least risky option as you go further up market, because they've been there, they've done that, they supported other customers. Whereas if you're a startup company and the rep is killer, asks all the right questions, builds rapport, multi-threads, but at the end of the day, if it lands on the CISO's desk and he's like, they don't have a SOC 2, they've never solved anybody like that, like, no, we're not going to take that risk as a business. So to answer your question, it's nuanced, but there are some places where I don't think the best rep wins.
I agree with you on now. If you consider all things considered and almost equal, right? I think you would agree that the best rep would win.
Yes. There you go.
Here's why I'm bringing this up, because I had a conversation. It was with a chief strategy officer, and it was with somebody else, but the chief strategy officer was telling me that they were in the buying phase of something. Okay. He actually knew that the other product was a little better. Okay. But the rep was so bad that he was, and they were up against this other company with this other rep, right? That the rep was good, and they liked the rep better, right? So then he brought in somebody else that was complete. He's like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you listen to these 2 companies and just tell me, what you think? And they came back and they're like, well, the one product seems better, but man, the rep just seems like an idiot.
Well, was it a rep that they were going to work with long term? Was it going to be their account manager?
Yeah, I guess
that matters.
And then they went back and said, "Hey, we're going to give you one more chance, like to
to the rep."
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yes, it was. I had this conversation, but it made me laugh so much because I've been on calls before versus competitors, and that the people would say, "Oh, I hate that company. I hate that company," and then the other person be like, "Oh, I love that company." I'm like, "Oh, they deal with a better rep than the other one."
Can you imagine having that conversation with the rep? Like, look, we like your product, but you suck as a rep. We're going to give you one more shot to get things in order, or we're going with your competition.
I literally was just sitting there at lunch just laughing. I'm like, and guess what? They did, and he sucked, and they went with the other company.
They should have went with their gut, because there's no way he was going to get better over a short period of time. It sounded like he sucked pretty bad anyways. But
right.
Your story remind me of, we were, as a company, going through a buying process. 2022 now. Geez, I can't believe how fast 2024 has gone. Maybe it was 2023. I don't know. It's all blending together. But to your point, we were looking at we were working with product marketing for a content management system. Oh, right on my face. Look at that.
Yeah, right.
And like a learning management platform as well. And we were looking at two of the well-known competitors in that space. And like, same thing, like they were like, we kind of like this product better, but like this sales team kind of sucks. Like we ended up going, but to your point, we ended up going with the team that we thought had a better product, but they were less skilled as reps. Because again, we're getting to that point as a company, from a risk standpoint, we had to look at all different angles and not just the proficiency of the rep.
It's an amazing, it's just a funny thing to watch as a sales rep turned sales leader. Just like, you've listened to so many calls, then you're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about this light board for a second.
Yes. The light board.
So how do you use this?
I mainly use it for like internal training content or stuff that I share on LinkedIn as much, because I'm not out in front of customers as much as I used to. If I go out in front of customers, I just use the actual whiteboard that we have on site. But, during COVID, as I mentioned, we weren't going out on site, and I'm like, I need to get my whiteboard fix in here. So that's when I bought this. So just for the people that are watching, this is a Revolution light board. So it's basically a pane of glass. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Revolution light board. It's a pane of glass, and then it has lights inside of the board that I just have like a little knob on the side. It turns on the lights. And then behind me is just a cloth black backdrop. So once I turn off the lights, the lights around the board illuminate this. So it makes it shine and glow. And it's a really, neat, if you saw my setup, like if I turned on the lights and you came in my office, you'd be like, wow, this is a lot less impressive than what I was thinking. It's very low tech, but it actually shows really cool. So people that are interested, go check out Revolution light boards. They have like all different sizes. I've got like I think it's like 35-inch, but they've got big whole studio packages. They've got all different options. And as I was telling Matt yesterday, if you're handy, which I am not, I'm the least handy person that you meet, there's like videos on YouTube of how to build your own light board. So for like under $100. This was a little bit more pricey than that, but if you're handy, go look on YouTube. You can build one yourself.
Now, have you actually used this in discovery calls?
No, because at the time that I got it, I was a leader of leaders. Wasn't really running discovery calls.
So I want to hit one more thing on discovery calls.
Yes.
To create the urgency, right? Oh no, Scott Roberts just said, I assume you have to write backwards, but you don't, right?
No, you don't, Scott. So that's I forgot to mention, everybody thinks I write backwards. I am definitely not that talented. So there's a camera on the that hooks to this that they sell. Revolution sells it, that automatically will flip the image for me. So although it looks like I'm writing backwards, I'm not. I'll tell you what I did have to do. So I am naturally left-handed. So again, this is flipped. So this probably looks like my left hand. It's not. You can see my wedding ring. But if you know anything about a left-handers smear because they write like this. So I used to write on a whiteboard. I'd smear everywhere. I'm like, okay, I've got to figure out how to do this, because the origin story of it is I was a young rep, got on site with an SC. He did the whole meeting from flip chart. And it was the most engaging meeting I've ever been. I was like, I got to learn how to do that. So I taught myself how to write right-handed so that I could actually lightboard. And it's actually not as hard as you think, because when you're whiteboarding, you're using more of your big muscles. You're not using like your mechanic like fingers. It's more of the big muscles. So it took me, a couple months to get it down. But yes, so I am naturally left-handed, but I'm writing white with my right hand when I whiteboard.
That's awesome. Now, you had a post a couple weeks ago, and I want to wrap up discovery and creating urgency, with creating real urgency with stuff like this. And I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you this.
Uh-oh.
But do you remember the post you had? Because I think it went pretty viral with the connecting the dots.
Oh, yes, I do. Again, that's one of those ones where, like, for me, I'm a big believer, like, that's a simplistic way to understand what the job of a seller is. So I think it was something like this.
Yeah.
Like this was this, and then I did the same thing on this side, right? And I think it was like your prospect's thoughts here, and then your job as a seller.
Yes.
Connecting the dots. So it's a very simplistic way to say what the job of the seller is.
But that's the truth, because I actually think there's two types of discovery, right? And I want to get into this now because I think this helps the urgency on the back end. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think there's discovery in the beginning about the pain and the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you're doing complicated deals, like you got to figure out how it is they actually buy, and you can actually get this thing done.
Yeah, most sellers think that discovery is a stage in the process. Like discovery is throughout the entire. It never ends. You only just incrementally learn more as you continue through the process.
Correct. So I want to get to, because I went back and listened to your podcast with Rob, and Rob, you won't even remember this because it was over a year ago. Because I sure didn't remember it. I always remember the fake urgency thing. Okay.
Yeah.
But you guys got into mutual action plans. And, mutual action plans is one of those things that I think people say, they just don't do it right. Okay. And the mutual action plan to me, I like especially on a first call or a second call, I almost like to give some homework just to even feel like, hey, where are we even at here? Like, I think they're interested, but boy, if they send this back, I'll get this. But you said two words that really struck a chord with me. And you even brought your wife into it too, which it resonated with me as well, which is a lot of it comes down to expectations and communicating.
As soon as you said you brought your wife into it, I knew exactly where you were going with that.
I mean, you said that and I just started laughing. I'm like, oh my God, it's where I get into the worst trouble. Like here's an exact thing that's going to happen in the next week. I never play golf anymore, but there's a time in December where my buddy's friend comes in and we always play on a Friday. Okay. And I have the morning shift with the kids, and I'm saying this on here. I know my wife's not watching, but it's almost as a reminder to me. I have the mornings with the kids, but I'm going to have to leave early that morning. And you know what I haven't done? I haven't put that on the calendar. And if I don't do it in the next couple days, and then I'll forget, and then next week on Thursday, I'll be like, hey, you remember I'm playing golf with Ryan on Friday, right? And it just all hell will break loose.
Well, you write it down right now, or why don't you take a little take a little break and put it on.
I'm writing it down right now. But
yeah, the problem with the perception of a mutual action plan from some sellers is, well, my buyer never opens it, or they, now there are digital sales rooms that have digital versions of it, but they're like, oh, well, they still never interact with it, or I send a Word doc or Excel and they don't use it. That's not the point. Like, that's actually putting more work on your buyer that you're right. They have too much other stuff to do that they're going to interact with it. That's not what it's for. It's for what you mentioned. It's about setting the expectations of what are the steps that are required to get to a successful evaluation, because you're the seller. You're the one that does this day in, day out. They don't evaluate software every day. We do. So it's more about, hey, we understand that this is your timeline. This is what you want to do. But just so you know, so there's no surprises. Like, these are the things that we need to do. And we need to slot them in based on what your timeline is that you're looking to accomplish. And these can fluctuate and move, but we want you to understand what the entire process is, so there's no surprises at the end.
Everything comes down to expectations.
Correct.
In everything. Hiring, onboarding, your what you're expected to do at work. Like if you want to think about it, every single problem that you have in life usually comes down because you probably set the wrong expectations.
Yes, my favorite little icon for a problem. Every problem is due to misaligned expectations, poor communication. It's a combination of those two every single time. Even like when, looks like I have a ponytail with this thing. Yeah. So like, I'll have my reps and they'll be like, oh, well, the customer came back and they're upset, but it's really their fault because we told them X, Y, and Z. And then we really dig into it. The messaging or the way that we communicated was very ambiguous. It was like, we will do X by, or there was no specificity into, we will do this at this time and this is the outcome that it will provide, versus, yeah, we'll get that done. Well, get that done when? Because your expectation may be in 24 hours, or the customer expectation is 24 hours, and your expectation is 72 because you don't feel that it's that important and you didn't ask the question of the prospect or customer.
I just always laugh with reps because the 24-hour thing. Like, I don't know, Keith, they haven't responded to me. I can't believe they haven't responded to me. It's like, dude, this is like number 1 on your priority list, and this is like 30 on theirs. It's like, and yeah. I think another reason we don't set, expectations or communicate is I always like the term happy ears.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, selling's hard. And when we think we have a win, we're all excited to like hop off the phone and go tell your boss that, oh my God, this deal's going to close. And then you forget to do 3 things.
Yeah. Yep. That's
they're all excited to you. Then you ask this question and we're like, well, oh shoot, I forgot to get that. It's like,
yeah, like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know that yet. Then you probably shouldn't commit that deal.
Right.
Yeah.
But
that's the difference. That's the reps priority. There's your prospects priority. Once they start to understand that, then they start to realize that they shouldn't get upset if they haven't heard back in 24 hours.
Correct. So somebody just asked, is this a sales pitch for this illuminated writing board? Say, well, it might be turning into it because I want one.
I wish, if you guys want, maybe I'll work something out with Revolution where they give me like some affiliate commissions or something when we get that worked out. But I will, for anybody that is interested, I will promise you it's so much fun. Even if you just never do it in front of a customer, it helps just to build your own communication skills, because when you have to think about what you're going to draw and creating a visual communication, you have to think about it. You can't just lean on slides as a crutch. And they're fun, man.
So I want to put a bow on the discovery and the fake urgency thing.
Okay.
I agree with Keith that discovery is not just a stage. It's something that never ends. And the best reps that create, urgency and find urgency are curious throughout the whole. They don't ask one question and then just stop, right? And the questions that they ask to be curious, I agree with you, Keith. It's like, well, how long have you done that? Why do you do it that way? It's actually simple things that show, that you're actually listening.
Yeah, I was going to say there's this framework. It's called the 5W1H method, which is super simple. It's like, what's the problem? Who is involved? Where is it occurring? Is it in a certain process or in a department? When did it start occurring? Why do they think the root cause is? And how have they tried to fix it before? And these are like all the this is like back to like 19, I don't know. It's like reporting questions. What, why, or what, who, why, when, who, and how. So it doesn't have to be sexy.
No, it just has to be simple. I think the simpler, the better anyway.
Correct.
All right. So from there, that's part of the discovery that you're kind of finding the problem, and then the expectations and communications of what has to be done by each party moving forward. I think that's a part that's skipped all the time, and I could almost argue which one's more important.
Another thing that I think is very important, especially as you go up market, is creating a written narrative between you and your buyer on what the problem is and what you're trying to solve. And no one is better at doing that than Nate Nasrallah. If you're not following him on LinkedIn, the guy is an absolute genius about writing business cases that are in the room when you're not in the room with a buyer, because 90% of the buying process typically happens without the rep, right? In the room. And he's got a very simple way to help write a compelling business problem. And it's based on two different things, right? One is costs and the second is consequences, right? And the thought is, or basically the formula, and he'll share more about it. It's, okay, the current problem is costing us X, which means insert negative consequence. If we don't solve it by X amount of time, then this bad thing also happens. So it's kind of like a Mad Lib type way to be able to create a very succinct problem statement that's then shared across the entire buying team that's in the room when you're not in the room. So go check him out if you're not already following him.
By the way, and I agree with you. It probably happens 90% of the time.
Yeah.
No matter what you try to do. All right, I'm going to make fun of us for a little bit here.
Uh-oh.
As we wrap this up.
Okay.
So every time I post about stupid stuff I did in sales and leadership, you always comment and be like, "Man, I did the same stuff." And even you've been in my head all week, because on Monday you posted about tabs.
Yeah.
It wasn't about tabs. What was that? That was about people that are always busy.
People that say they're good at multitasking are also the same people that have 70 tabs, 200 Slack messages, 3,000 unread email addresses. But yeah, this is Matt's setup in his browser, and then someone else posted it, right? Ian Koniak posted about it too, and you're like, this thing is following me everywhere today.
It's like I had retargeting on my LinkedIn feed, although I like Ian's stuff and I like and comment on his stuff a lot, but it literally was following me around. But I want to go to one of the things, right? And we could talk about a million mistakes we made as sales leaders, but just because this is top of head, because you posted about it on Monday, is that, so many times in the beginning of my career, I would have reps say to me, it's like, "Oh my God, you have so much going on. There's no way I could ever want to bother you or do this."
Mm-hmm.
And look, as managers, we do have a lot going on. Leaders, whatever position that you're in, right? You're interviewing, onboarding, training, coaching, one-on-ones, team meetings. You got to meet with your boss, forecasting. Right. I mean, you could go on and on. Right. And I know that post about you was you missed your son's. I think you missed his Taekwondo belt or
Jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu. I should know jiu-jitsu because I hear Jocko talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And a funny story about jiu-jitsu. I'm listening to, Jocko's always talking about how you have to do jiu-jitsu, And I'm like, maybe I should do jiu-jitsu, And then I go to this birthday party, for my daughter. There is a guy walking around. It could have been Jocko with a jiu-jitsu shirt on. And I'm like, I'm never doing jiu-jitsu. That guy would kill me.
You be surprised. Like you could be a little wiry guy and just take down. I mean, it's all about the technique and leverage, and so yeah.
But I want to go back to, because you were in that situation, right? Like probably, like I used to get. This is before kids, right? So if you have kids, I always think about that now too. Like I would have almost died the way I was acting. Like getting to work, it's before 6, leaving at 5 or 6, right? Having a million things going on. But what can you credit? And I can talk about some of the things I credit that helped me out. But you talked about a little bit in Monday's post. What's some of the things that you did to help that, and buy some of your time back?
Yeah. I mean, for me, number one is, when that happened, it was because it was the end of a quarter. We were trying to close a deal that never closed. And I worked until like 8 p.m. trying to get it done to find out that it wasn't going to close. Part of that's on me. We should have known that ahead of time. Right. And I remember I was up in my room and my son, you could just tell he was disappointed. And I remember walking down steps and I literally fell to my knees and just broke down. And I was like, I couldn't believe I let that happen. So I'm like, I've got to change. Like going back to controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
I'm in control of my email. I'm in control of my calendar. I'm in control over what I say yes and what I say no at. So I went back and I really dug deep and like built a ton of systems to take back my time, and basically built a whole operating system on how I manage a lot of this stuff. Some of the stuff, funny enough, I started sharing it. If people go to my LinkedIn profile, I've got one of what I call a mini system in my featured section that you can check out, but it's around these small minor changes that stack on top of each other and create a compounding effect that I've been able to get my time back. I've never been more happy at work. I've never been more active on social and talking with other people, with my family. I'm just in a really good spot. I'm blessed. And, but sometimes you need that, like, that moment of, I can't believe that happened, to make the changes that were necessary.
That's good. You need to have that sometimes, because if it doesn't happen, it doesn't change. I know for me, I walked in to my boss's office and I literally was bitching about every single person on the floor.
How'd that go?
He finally looked at me and stopped. He goes, Matt, you can't just fire everybody. And my response was, why? And he gave me so much shit. But the truth was, it took me at least a year or two to figure out. I was so subjective and emotional. And when you're subjective and emotional as a manager, you don't really know what's going on. Like, that's when I'm running around just trying to chase every deal and try to do everything for everybody. And it wasn't until, I figured out, like, accountability, to be more objective and unemotional, that it was like, okay, here's the facts, here's what's going on, right? I'm sure that's like a lot of what your systems tell you. Yeah. Because it's like, what's really a problem and what's not? Because when it's like your opinion, it always seems like it's a problem, but like the data and your systems help you really sort through, which is like, what is this really a problem or no?
And I would also say that usually leaders that are frantic and very emotional, it's many times because they have so much stuff going on internally and they haven't managed that then becomes like their reaction, because they've got so much stuff going on. They're so frazzled. Like someone asks them something and you get short fused. That's why I'm such a big believer. And I mean, I'm sure most people, if you're in sales and you haven't read it, read Atomic Habits. Most people have, but he talks about this whole systems over goals. Like winners and losers have the same goals, right? Everybody, like you go to the Olympics, what is your goal? Your goal is to win the gold medal. But those that have the right systems are usually the ones that see the success. One of my favorite books, but systems are more important than your goals because
Well, I'm backwards here. So, I'm like you, I'm backwards. But
Yeah.
you see my small wins equals big wins sign, which is from my brother's Post-it note that we found in his car.
yeah.
But I had never read Atomic Habits. And I'll tell you how smart I am is that I start listening to the book and I'm like, atomic means small? I just didn't know that.
You were thinking big habits, right?
Yeah, I don't know what I just was like. I don't know. I just didn't know what atomic. I always think atomic bomb, but now that you like understand what that means, and I'll tell you, I love how he sets you up for success. And one of the things that I've done since I've read that book is he talks about like making it making it easy for you to do. And one of the things I implemented with that is I take my daughter to school, and on the way back, I can stop at the gym because it's on the way home. But that's all from just the time. Like he makes it so easy.
It's such a like very practical, and it opens your mind up to like things like they talk about, just like even your eating habits. And it's not like people don't want to change their eating habits. Sometimes they need to change their environment to change their circumstances, right? If you're in a place where there's always chips and there's always cupcakes and, little Debbie's, and now I'm getting hungry because I have a sweet tooth myself, you're probably going to be prone to eat all of that. It's very similar to the people you hang around with. I'm a big believer that you hang around other successful sellers, you'll be successful, and the opposite's also true.
Let me throw one at you that I shared on Mike Weinberg's podcast that he loved. Is I had sent this to him. He wanted a couple topics I wanted to talk about. I say, because my parents used to say, you are who you hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the type of rep is the type of accounts they hang out with. Yeah. So if you want to know the type of rep, go ask them the top 5 accounts they're working, and that'll tell you a lot about the rep.
That's a good one.
I love that.
That's a really good one. And it's very true, right? You can find out really quickly, like, I don't think those 5 that you think are so good, they're not even in our ICP.
Right. So, that's a good one. Wait, you mean the one that nobody's responded to your email for 3 weeks and you're not even a month and hasn't done anything like that? Like I'm telling you, anybody listening, if you're a leader, go ask your reps about their top 5 accounts. They'll tell you a lot.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about? I think we covered everything.
Maybe we end with one final question, because I've been thinking about this and I'd be curious to get your answer. So as a new leader, what was, now looking back, what do you think was your biggest mistake?
Oh, easy. I thought it was going to be easy. And I thought I was going to solve everybody's problem to just teach everybody to do what I do. And I promise you, Keith, every single client that I have does the same thing.
Yeah.
They just can't understand what's so hard. Why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? Because they were good. And I'm telling you, that is the biggest mistake that everybody makes. And there's somebody out there that doesn't make that mistake. God bless you. And I want to hear how you didn't make it. What's yours?
It was the same thing. Really, it's like trying to teach everybody to sell the way that I sell.
Yep.
Which is, it's awful, because like what makes you truly unique as a seller is your own individual style, your own individual voice. That's why I'm a big proponent of like, go learn from a lot of different people. Because what happens is you start to say, okay, I'm going to take that piece from Matt. Maybe I'll take this thing from Nate. Maybe I'll draw like Keith. And then it becomes your own unique voice that helps really be the true unique differentiator. If you had a bunch of people going out and doing the same exact things, like that's not going to help anyone. So yes, trying to make people exactly like I did and similar to you, wondering why they just couldn't do it the same way. Big mistake I made early on in my career.
I'll throw a second one in. And this is something that I've been really on for a while, which is you always look for what's wrong.
Yeah.
You always look for what's wrong in the person, what they're bad at, what they don't like to do, and then you're gonna change it because you think that's the secret formula to get them better.
Yeah.
I start with any new client either on our first or second call. I work with a journal and they have to fill stuff out, so I know what's going on. And I used to ask them this question, but I kept getting the worst answers, which, when we start talking about their B and their C players, it'd be like, what are they good at? And like the call would go blank and it'd be like, I mean, nothing. You got to be good at something, right? So now I put it on a piece of paper. So like there's thought into it and they have to think about it because people like to do stuff that they're good at.
Correct.
And the more you can get them doing more of what they're good at, the better they're going to be. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't room for improvement in some things, but it's way easier to get people doing more of what they like doing than stuff they suck at and they don't like doing.
Yes. Totally agree with that.
But we always just look for the bad. And there's
human nature, right? In many cases.
In sales, there's so much bad that goes on, right? That you got to look for the good.
Yeah.
There is good. Anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, I've definitely enjoyed our time today. We should probably do this again some other time. And I really appreciate you having me on, man. It's been great getting to know you. I think that's the power of LinkedIn for anybody that I didn't know Matt from Adam, several months ago. And then we just happened to come across each other on LinkedIn and started connecting and talking. I really enjoyed building the relationship that we have. So I encourage others to be active on social. It opens up so many different opportunities. So thank you for
for sure.
Yeah.
And I've told you this, and I've sent your profile to people. I send your posts to people all the time. Like you, and I'm not just saying this, like you were one of the most thoughtful posters on LinkedIn. So if you're not following him, you please, please go and follow Keith because you will thank me for it.
I appreciate you, man.
All right, man. I appreciate it. This is a little bit delayed, but I don't think. Can you tell us the difference? Oh, can you tell us the difference between fake and real urgency? I think we covered that. Did we not cover that enough, Jeffrey? But I would just say real urgency is found, and fake urgency is made up on something that you could offer, any day of the week. That would be my definition. How about yours?
I would say real urgency is tied to a compelling event that the customer cares about. Fake urgency is tied to a compelling event that the salesperson cares about, like quarter, end of the year. Customers don't care about that.
That might be the simplest. That might be a post that
I was going to say that might be a post, huh?
That might be a post. Is that real is tied to the customer and fake is tied to the rep.
Yeah.
I think we got to end on that.
Awesome. Thanks,
All
man.
right, man. Thanks, man.